Stanley presents, oh, hey, that's me, The Further Adventures of Indiana Jones. Excelsior.
Welcome.
It's time for The Further Adventures of Indiana Jones.
Some of the greatest adventures of my life are sitting in this museum.
Big deal.
Pack your bag, grab your passport, and prepare to go globetrotting with Dark Horse Comics' classic four-color adventures of Indiana Jones.
Oh, your teacher.
Part-time.
Mr. Henry Jones, Jr. of Princeton, New Jersey.
I like Indiana.
We're named the dog Indiana.
Now, what shall we talk about?
Well, welcome IndyCast listeners and further fans to the Further Adventures of Indiana Jones. I'm Joe Stuber.
And I'm Keith Voss.
Hey, Keith, man, it has been a little while. Glad to get back together with you again. Always enjoy chatting about Indiana Jones with you. Too far in between some of these conversations. I don't know that I'm going to enjoy the subject of what we're talking about today, but we'll give it a shot.
I'm happy just to talk to you. I'm not so happy to talk about this Indiana Jones comic that we're going to be reviewing today. The Philosopher's Stone has indeed resurrected us back onto the IndyCast, but unfortunately, I wish it just left us wherever we were, because in rereading this comic for our review today, I quickly discovered that this is probably one of my least favorite Indiana Jones stories.
Probably?
Yeah, okay. No.
I'm going to take probably out. I think this is my least favorite. Boy, and sorry, IndyCast listeners, to start off like that. But look, we got to call them like we see them. You know, we got to call them like we see them.
I wish we were more enthusiastic about this comic, but like I said, I'm more enthusiastic about talking to you and reconnecting with all the listeners. It has been such a long time since we've been back on the show together. So, yeah, I'm excited to get into it regardless.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about Indiana Jones and the Iron Phoenix. Look, we've always said, Dark Horse Comics are a mixed bag on some of these, especially these ones that are like based on failed video games or abandoned projects or something. It's just like, when you're jumping from one medium to the other, it doesn't always translate as well. This definitely falls into that category, at least for me and apparently for you. And as we'll find out later in this segment with some other listeners as well. 4 issues, Dark Horse Comics, December 1994 to March 1995. That's what we got. Like I said, it's based on a canceled LucasArts video game. This was intended to be a sequel to Fate of Atlantis. I guess you get to the end of Fate of Atlantis, it's like Indiana Jones will return. They had planned this out. But I tell you what, we're not going to get, you're the gamer, I'm not, but we can talk about the video game aspect of it. But for hardcore gamers, for ones that want to know the history of this, I'm telling you what, there's a really good article. The website is the International House of Mojo. It's a LucasArts fan site. There's a 9-page article devoted just to the history of this abandoned project, this abandoned video game. One of the original designers, Eric Wilmunder, who, as Keith, when you get to the credits, we're going to talk about him because they actually reference all the LucasArts folks in the credits on the comic book.
Right.
So on that, also Wilmunder.com, like the 63-page, I think it's 63 pages, like story treatment for the game itself, the whole outline.
Storyboards. Yeah,
there's
storyboards.
Yeah, character, images and all these different things. So there's a 9-page article about the history of it, and then it links to this 63-page document. So if you want to know all about the game, what could have been back in the 90s, this supposed sequel to Fate of Atlantis, it's out there. We'll send it to Ed. He can put a link up in the show notes for the episode on the IndyCast. But so we'll chat about it. But for our intents and purposes, we're going to talk about the comic book, obviously, and how they took this abandoned idea and, well, what are we going to do with it? Let's make a comic book out of it.
I guess that's all they could do with it at that point. What else can you do?
I guess.
The thing is, this adaptation, if it was, the Fate of Atlantis adaptation isn't a direct adaptation of the video game either. So one has to think, what exactly would the game have been like had they made this game? Had they gone ahead and made this game? Because this book to me was just extremely boring. There wasn't so much action in there. So what kind of things would they have added to this game to make it remotely playable?
Yeah.
I have no idea.
And that's the thing. I mean, I guess you can get into all the, that document and see where it would have gone from there. I'm sure they would have done something with it. From what I've read, I don't know how much is, you read about all these different things, but from what I understand, that designer, Eric Wilmunder, I guess he had left at one point, and so that didn't help the project. The original villain of the piece was supposed to be Hitler, which, when you're trying to sell a video game product in Germany, that's probably not going to go over that well.
That's forbidden, and the swastika is also forbidden.
But verboten, yeah. And so, you saw that
verboten.
on the Indiana Jones toys. The action figures that come out, like, they have to call them, like German soldiers and things like that. They can't have the swastika and things like that. So, yeah, and so obviously that was changed for this comic book as well. Hitler's not the main villain in this. So, there's that whole background there. But again, I think, to me, and we'll get into this, it does feel like a video game script as you're going through. And I think that's the problem I had with the Fate of Atlantis comic. Although, like you said, that one was fleshed out much more into a story elements, different things, characters coming in. This one really feels like level to level to level to screen to screen to screen. And there's just like almost no character development.
And not well connected, though. I mean, how I felt was that it was just... Indiana Jones is a globe-trotting archaeologist adventurer, but it still didn't even work in this story. It just felt so disjointed, and the locations, everything just kind of, I don't know, it was like a mess, a mixture of just not so exciting sequences, and I don't know. But we should just get into it, I guess.
No, and I thought this would be like right up your alley too, because you got zombie Nazis. That's right up your alley. You love Indian zombies.
Again, I will defend. People all around the world disagree with me. That
you're the lone voice shouting in the world.
That's okay. That's okay. I enjoyed that book. When you want to talk about Indiana Jones and zombies, I think it worked in that book. It doesn't quite work here. I thought the idea of using the Philosopher's Stone's powers to kind of reanimate Hitler's ashes, I thought that was an interesting idea. Kind of never went anywhere. It turns out that I'm getting way too far ahead, but I thought
that's always a trope too, isn't it? Like, Hitler may be still alive. Can we bring back Hitler? And then
how can you do it?
What bigger villain could you get than Hitler? They even used him in Last Crusade.
Right. I think if they focused on that MacGuffin alone, on that story plot line alone, we could have had a pretty decent story. But unfortunately, that was a very small part of it. It was a very tiny, small part of it, and I think that was a big mistake.
Indiana Jones and Nazis, 0 for 2 for me. Not working out well. I don't think those two. It's not chocolate and peanut butter. Those two things for me don't go well together. I don't like Indiana Jones and Nazi and zombies. Or zombie Nazis or zombie whoever. It doesn't matter to me. So anyway, hey, let's check out the creative team. Why don't you give us the rundown? And they do mention like the whole creative team from LucasArts here too. So in the comic book, which is interesting.
And the cool thing too, it's also the team from the Arms of Gold. So you kind of get the same team there. But we have Indiana Jones and the Iron Phoenix. The story is by Joe Pinney, Hal Barwood, of course. We've seen that name before from Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis, of course. Bill Stoneham and Eric Wilmunder, which we talked about earlier about the
63 pages of him out there if you want to get inside the mind of Eric Wilmunder.
And all of those guys are from the LucasArts Entertainment Company. So the comics adaptation script was by Lee Mars. The art is by Leo Diranonia. Colors by Perry McNamee and Frank Lopez. And of course, we have some. Of course, the greatest thing about these Dark Horse comics, great Dave Dorman cover artwork.
I mean, that's the thing. If you're a collector, if you're a completist, if you want you do get those amazing covers. And they are all, at least these ones up to this point, are based on like promotional images or images from the films that we see. But man, I mean, Dorman just knocks it out of the park with these covers. Yes. I mean, just even that first one for issue number 1, you get Indiana Jones on the motorcycle. He's taking aim. You get the Iron Phoenix in the back, the flames. He's coming up through the flame. Yeah, nothing is exciting in the book.
Right. I was going to say, too bad you get nothing of that.
No, no.
There is none of that even remotely close.
Could you imagine
to that
though,
in the comic.
Almost like an Alex Ross version of Indiana Jones, but like done with Dave Dorman, like paintings throughout, like that, because like the covers make you want. But again, that's what they were trying to do. They wanted to sell, when they were on newsstands, when they're on racks back in the 90s. They wanted to sell books.
Unfortunately, you open the book and then you get this, which it's basically a guy in a hat. It looks nothing like Harrison Ford.
Yeah.
Very, very bland artwork. Not a fan of the interior artwork.
The covers,
basically, the covers sell it for me. They sold it for me back then. Right now, I'm reading out of the Indiana Jones Dark Horse Omnibus Volume 2, which has Iron Phoenix in it. They unfortunately do not provide you with all of the covers. They give you only one cover, and the cover that is in the omnibus is Indy being kind of overtaken by the by all the weeds,
by poison ivy.
By all the poison ivy.
Poison ivy comes in. There's a Batman crossover or something going on. Yeah, so you got the covered issue number 2.
That would have been way better and cooler than what we actually got in this comic.
Yeah, so obviously in issue 1 we've got Indiana Jones on the motorcycle. The one you referenced there is where he's kind of like all the weeds and everything kind of overtaking him from issue 2. 3, it's that shot from Raiders where he's like taking the statue in the Well of the Souls and kind of riding it down. So we got that. And then, zombie Nazis on the cover, issue number 4. So you get those great covers. That's the reason to buy the issues. Don't buy them for the story. I wouldn't say that. It's just not a good plot. But if you want those amazing Dave Dorman covers, get all 4 issues. Just maybe cut them out and put them in a collage and put them on your wall or something. That'd be kind of awesome too. So, hey, why don't we talk about the plot? And before we do that,
always music to my ears. Haven't heard her in a long time.
She's there. Well, I don't know what she's screaming about. I mean, is it just we're warning people about the spoilers, or stay away from the story? I don't know. I'm about ready to scream like that as well too. So look, you start with the covers and it goes downhill from there. It really does. Look, we're gonna call it like we see it here. It's again, you're taking it from this video game story, and that's I think when you look back, Mike Richardson from Dark Horse back in the day, he they in Back Issue magazine they had that sort of breakdown of the Marvel series and the Dark Horse series, and they talked to him about that, and he mentioned that was a problem with Indiana Jones was that it's basically the same plot. He's going to get something. There's a MacGuffin. He goes running after it. All these kind of strange things happen and builds to a big thing at the end, and then he goes back to teaching college at the end. So how do you do that? And that was an issue with the Marvel books, was that they always kind of ran into problems with Lucasfilm of trying to get a monthly ongoing series. Well, you can't advance those characters a lot because they weren't sure what they were going to do with them.
Exactly.
So they'd always get those notes, and I think that was stifling to the creative teams. It definitely was stifling to the creative teams back then. We talked about that so many times. Yeah, yep. And so that when Dark Horse took over, you get these miniseries. It's like, okay, well, we're not going to do a monthly adventure. You don't have to advance these characters. We'll just do these little compact adventures. But to me, some of the problem that runs into here is you don't get that character development. You do get sort of just a series of events, and then you get this sort of pre-approved Lucasfilm or LucasArts at the time. How are we going to do? Well, here's a ready-made story that we're not doing anything with. This is already pre-approved. Well, if you're Dark Horse, just take that and run with it. It's already done. Exactly. It's already pre-approved. You don't have to run it through George Lucas or through whatever person was in charge of, approving those things for the comic book stories at the time. It's already pre-approved. So you just run with it. But it doesn't translate from that medium. And like I said, as you're going through this, it just feels like even the first issue. Look, here's from Dark Horse. I know I'm all over the map here, but it's like, here's the synopsis from Dark Horse Comics. All right, 1947, post-war Germany. Indy is braving the political turmoil and treacherous rubble of Berlin to find the Key of Solomon, a scroll detailing the whereabouts of the legendary Philosopher's Stone, which is what you mentioned. Fabled to have the power to turn lead into gold and to bring the dead to life. Indy sets off for the stone, dodging Soviet bureaucrats and Nazis, all of them hunting the same prize. Will the Third Reich rise again? I don't know. 1940s. I don't even know, from the comic book, I don't even know if it's 1947.
Well, it does. To be fair, it does say in the beginning Berlin, 1947.
Where?
In the very first issue, in the omnibus, it's that way anyway.
But in the synopsis, or on the page of the comic?
In the very first page of the comic.
Okay, so I've got Indiana Jones. I'm looking at the comic proper, and it starts with the shot of the
mansion.
The mansion.
Right.
Yeah, is it there?
That's right there.
Oh
Berlin,
no, it's not.
1947.
Nope, not in the original comic.
So there you go. Somebody somewhere said, "Hey, we need to make that." Was it George Lucas? It's the George Lucas special edition that we're reading.
The director's cut.
No.
Well, but you saw that in the Marvel books too.
I saw Jar Jar in issue 3 somewhere too. I don't know if that's.
Did Indy shoot first? Wait a minute. What's going on here? We saw that in the Marvel versions too, though, where there was it a spelling error or something? It was corrected in a later.
Yeah.
So
something with the Raven bar, something was misspelled,
Okay,
and then they corrected it later on. That's great that they do that.
Right, but doesn't that tell you how quickly these things were put out and how little thought was put into it? And I think that's the thing that's frustrating for me, because when you look at this, first of all, I don't know what he's doing. I don't know where he's going. I don't know where he is. I don't know what year it is. There's no detail on this. Now, if you read the synopsis from the game, I guess, I don't know, how would you get that back then? Wilminer didn't even release that until I think last year. So you don't know what in the world's going on here. And again, it's just very confusing. Is he in Berlin? There's Russians. There's a Russian. So is he in Russia? I don't know where he is.
And why is he even there in the first place?
There's no.
I mean, we
just give me a
don't
paragraph.
know.
Yeah, just give me a little, Indiana Jones is doing this.
Even in the beginning of Raiders, we have enough expositional dialogue about Forrestal. He was a competitor. He's trying to get in here. Like, no one has survived coming through here. We get the danger. We get why he's there. We get his motivation as a character. All right. Now, granted, we know enough about Indiana Jones by the time that this comic book comes out to know what his motivation is. He is an archaeologist. He's a treasure hunter. He's a thrill seeker. We know what his motivation is.
What if he didn't? What if you're new to the comic books? What if you're a kid just picking this up for the first time?
You still have to set something up. And just to go back a little bit to what you said before, I mean, these Dark Horse comics, I mean, we're talking about these were written and printed after the trilogy was finished. After the movie trilogy was finished, they didn't plan on making any movies anymore. They had pretty much as much creative freedom.
That is something I was wondering about. Now, see, that I don't know, because there's always that thing of, like, even with the Star Wars comics, it was like, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, because we could get into this area. Did they think that? Right, but did they think that with the Indiana Jones films? Because we know Harrison Ford always wanted to do. Every time he was interviewed in a New York Minute, I'd go back to that character. He loved it, Right. So every time they just couldn't get together on a script and a story and their schedules until Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. So were they thinking of doing more with these? And plus, you had the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles. So was there a thought to maybe tie that in even tighter than just having Harrison Ford with a saxophone or something? I don't know, but
it obviously hindered and hurt, I think, these stories. I think it hurt these stories because if they didn't have complete creative freedom, if Lucasfilm or LucasArts just said, you know what, I don't think there's going to be any more movies, kind of do what you want with the character, then maybe we would have gotten some more daring, more interesting stories. Yeah. This one definitely felt way kind of by the book, kind of like, all right, blah, 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 point A, point B, point C, like you said before, levels in a video game. And to me, that's boring. That's why I did like Indiana Jones and the Army of the Dead so much. It was a little different. It was something different. Temple of Doom, I liked it. Why? It was something different. I mean, I'm a fan of let's do something just a little different. I mean, they went the safe route again with Last Crusade. Not saying Last Crusade's a bad movie. I love Last Crusade, but I mean, it is a lot like Raiders in many, many ways. So, they're trying to replicate this formula that obviously works, but there's only so many times you could do it before, I'm just going to get bored of it. Give me something different with this character.
Yeah, and everything about this particular series, everything to me about a lot of the Dark Horse era feels rushed, feels unfinished. This series in particular, to me, feels incredibly rushed, incredibly unfinished. And, I mean, even, like you said, the artwork, it's really sketchy. It almost looks like unfinished pencils in a lot of parts.
terrible.
And we always talk about the fact that we can never get a proper depiction of Marcus Brody. But man, he does not look like Carol O'Connor. I mean, he looks like Archie Bunker in these things. It's so cheesy. Cheesy, Indy, come on.
Meathead.
I know.
Indy, you meathead.
It's so bad. I mean, come on. Look, I get that there's, likeness rights and all these different things. But you got, even in the Star Wars comics, when they would have all these different artists coming in, and there were a lot of them, and a lot of different styles coming in, to even like almost like a manga influence at some point. They still look like Luke. They still look like Leia. It still look like Han. It still look like Chewbacca. It's like they still look like the characters are supposed to be looking like. This doesn't look anything even close to it. And then you get through this issue 1. At first, I don't know what's going on. By the way, it's just very confusing to me, this whole story. And then you get to the end, that last panel, and the Soviets have Indy captive, and then he disappears, and then there's the last panel says the American, he's vanished, but it doesn't say to be continued. So you flip through, and I'm looking at the comic book proper. You're looking at the omnibus, which probably goes right into the next page.
Right. It does.
Yeah, I've got an ad for Star Wars Dark Empire 2. I've got Aliens Berserker. I've got another Dark Horse Comics ad. I've got Aliens Predator. I've got James Bond, Quasimodo Gambit, Batman versus all these ads, Grendel, and then there's nothing.
Yeah.
There's nothing. It doesn't say coming next month, issue 2. And it's a very odd thing. It's not like to be continued. It's not even a good cliffhanger thing. And you go into issue number 2, and it picks up with the exact same panel going, how could he have disappeared? And there's still no...
And then you see Indy on the wall like Spider-Man. Yeah. He's not a superhero.
No, and how would he have gotten up there?
How did he get up there?
Without them knowing.
And it's not only just that, they do that several times in this series. There's like when Indy is kind of he's trying to escape from one of the mansions later on, and he like jumps out of a second story window with no visible way of landing safely. Doesn't use his whip, not jumping on a truck or anything. And the next panel, he's just like on the ground running. It's like, how did the guy just jump out of a second story window and not break his leg or even get hurt? That's the cool thing about Indy. He's a man. He gets hurt. He goes through these trials and tribulations. Raiders of the Lost Ark. Go back to the masterpiece again. After the truck chase, Indy's on the boat with Marion. The guy's hurt. He just wants to sleep. He wants some rest. He's not a superhero, guys. It just doesn't work.
Speaking of the truck chase, we do get the horse transfer onto the truck, almost exact scene from Raiders of the Lost Ark in there too. So
yeah.
Even that is not an original aspect of it. I mean, you're kind of taking things from Raiders of the Lost Ark in there too. The good things very few and far between. But one of the things I do like is the very end of issue number 2. We almost get a panel that reminds me of John Byrne's The Sentinel. Remember that like teaser artwork where like the big statue was coming to life behind him, or the warrior or whatever with the sword. It kind of reminds me of that. It's a cool moment. I have no idea what's happening here in it and what it means, and it's something about the Iron Phoenix, and it's some hallucination that he has, and he kind of sees the Ark of the Covenant, and he kind of sees the Grail, but it's not the Grail that they got.
It's the false Grail for sure. It's got to be the false Grail.
Why was he so hopped up about it? Because wouldn't he look at that and go, why is that there? Like, why wouldn't he imagine the actual Grail, which is the one he was going after? I don't even get this. It's just like all these strange moments. And like a lot of phone conversations between him and Marcus, and I almost had to like keep rereading comedy? Those.
Yeah, it's
I don't know. I mean, how many times did you have to reread a lot of the expositional dialogue to even figure out what was going on? I mean, like our main, to be honest, Nadia Kirov.
To be honest, I didn't read it because I read it once and I was like, no, I'm not wasting my time in rereading.
But even Nadia, did you get like her motivations in a lot of these things? Because it's like they're trying to get Indy to go and get all these pieces of the Philosopher's Stone, which were scattered to 3 corners of the earth or something.
Right.
And if you bring these together, you can make lead into gold. And you can also reanimate, and I get that that's the Philosopher's. I get that, and there's even a book, Indiana Jones and
Philosopher's. Way better, by the way. Read the book. Read Indiana Jones and the Philosopher's Stone.
But is this the Key of Solomon? Is it the Iron Phoenix? Is it the Philosopher's Stone? What are we going after here?
Yeah.
What are we, there's like all over the place. But again, that's a video game aspect of it. That's like you got to get all these little pieces of this and then get this and then get this. And
yeah,
so
and that statue that would have come alive, that would have definitely been an end boss. But it actually reminded me a lot of the the cutscene from Raiders of the Lost Ark, where Indy goes to get I guess another piece of the headpiece to the Staff of Ra.
Oh, when he goes to
I think it's in Japan.
Yeah, because that became the gong scene from Temple of Doom. They reused.
Right.
Yeah, right. So yeah. But again, you cut that out of the movie because it slows down. Yeah. I mean, you slow down the pace on some of these things too. It's just very strange. I don't know the motivations of Nadia. Like I said, they're trying to use Indiana Jones. She's trying to use him to get these pieces. I don't know why she just doesn't go get them.
And they also need a girl in the story. I mean, she's, they need the female protagonist as well. So why not her? But she just kind of didn't fit really. But this is also Indy's real. I don't know. Is this his first kind of brush with the Russians?
That's what I kind of thought was interesting about this, because you do get some sort of like a precursor to Crystal Skull, because you do get it's set after the war, so you get the Russians, you get sort of a Spalko. I mean, she's very kind of like a Spalko character. It's in that Roswell 1947, so you're in sort of the Roswell era, which connects to Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. So there are some interesting elements of this. I just don't know that any of them were. It just seems so disjointed.
Yeah,
all of it
really is.
And you get the main villain, Matthias Jaeger. I mean, I needed Jagermeister after this one.
Jaeger.
Jagermeister.
Which means hunter in German. So I mean,
let me knock back a few Jaegers here and see if I can get through the rest of this.
I needed to knock back a few Jaegers.
Who was supposed to be Hitler, in the game, and he becomes this. So I mean, again, like you said, that's a pretty cool, interesting thing of like reanimating Nazis for this guy. It's almost like a Red Skull kind of villain when you get into it.
That's exactly what I thought. I was going to make a mention of that. He reminded me of Red Skull, Indiana Jones being the Captain America. But like this guy comes so late into the story.
Issue 4, like halfway through issue 4.
Why are we not introduced at least, have him in the shadows at some point and then reveal him to be this like mummified, almost Hitler-like zombie Nazi?
Wouldn't that have been cool?
That would have been way cooler.
Yeah, because we have Nadia. She's talking all this. I guess there's a history there with her. Was he torturing her at some point? Or I'm trying to remember now. As you go back, but there's some sort of history between those two, and she wants to keep the Philosopher's Stone out of his hands so that he doesn't do these nefarious means. It's just, I don't know. Like you said, it's very video gamey, very next level boss kind of thing. But with the character development, like that would have been perfect to introduce him early and get sort of all that exposition so that we care about these characters,
right?
And then we see how sinister he is. And he's like, oh man, Indy's got to stop this. And then he can become like a Captain America character,
right?
And maybe working with the U.S. government.
This could have been a story that takes place. He could have been working still for the government and just taking. Yeah, but like it just, you don't get any motivation at all.
It has the depth of a video game. It does not have the depth of even a television adventure or a movie adventure. And again, the artwork, a lot of these things are very strange. Even in issue 3, there's one panel. It's like months later, and you're like, "Whoa, what happened? He escaped here, and then all of a sudden it's months. Well, what happened in those intervening months?
Doing? What's he been doing?
Right? Was there another adventure in there? Because we know, like some of these things, it's like Indy goes off for 2 weeks and has a whole adventure. Like,
I mean, it's like some of the dialogue is just completely clunky and unbelievable. When Indy is kind of being held captive by those witches in Ireland, and some of the things that they say, you're just like, it's just completely unbelievable. It's just completely, they wouldn't say that. The way that they're being written is kind of weird. I guess they're phonetically writing out an Irish accent. Mm-hmm. Well, then why didn't they do that with any of the German speakers? Why didn't they do that with any of the Russians? Why didn't they? So it's just not like it's a little, it's just confusing.
Yeah.
It's just confusing.
And again, we sort of have the, this end, like it does look, if you're going to get any, issue 4 is probably the best of them. And like we're talking, like, because you asked me before, it's like, is it coming to an end? Is that why? It's like, yeah.
Yes, it's
but
the best one because it's ending. That's why.
But you do get zombie Nazis. So, like, if you want to see Indiana Jones and zombie
For
Nazis,
like 3 pages, yeah.
you do, but you kind of get that. But then he's like, all the pieces of the Philosopher's Stone coming together, and it's like, Jaeger gets swallowed up by this or gets destroyed by it. And is it clear in the comic as to why that happens? I mean, I know It's like he wasn't pure of heart or something. I read that somewhere, but I don't know that that's established in the comic book. It's just like, it just happens. He just gets,
And that tower just looks completely terrible. It just looks like when it's exploding and like there's, I guess, police or something coming coming towards Indy and Nadia from the distance. It just looks like, wait, that's supposed to be like this huge tower. It looks completely off.
Way off.
The scale is way, way off. So it's overall just very, very poor. Very, very poor. I mean, to me, the Further Adventures by Marvel, they were just way better than this on every level.
Yeah, and again, it's not, you kind of go back to, it was written, it's a game, we're not making this thing. Here's this story. It's already done, here, go ride with this. That's not really the way to approach a comic book story. You really should get a great creative team, come up with some amazing characters, try to advance the characters, try to advance the story as much as you can. This one just seemed like a rushed product.
Yeah.
Like, hey, we've got this finished thing. Let's slap some amazing Dave Dorman covers on this thing and sell it. But as a story, look, I'm going to say it's probably my least favorite Indiana Jones comic book story of all time.
I'm with you.
I'm not. There's
wait. Even more than you like Army of the Dead more than this?
That's not a comic book. I did preface it with comic book.
Okay, that's all right. Good point. I thought you said story, but
no,
you're absolutely right.
Comic book story.
Don't forget though too that LucasArts is coming off of Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis, which was very successful for them. It was basically it was the fourth Indiana Jones movie for us, kind of like how Shadows of the Empire was for Star Wars. It was the Star Wars movie that was never made. Like, they came out with, it was a multimedia project. They had a book. They even had a soundtrack. They had comic books. They had everything. So I felt like Fate of Atlantis was kind of the same thing. I mean, they had the video game. They had the comic book. So I felt that they wanted to kind of replicate that success by giving us a sequel, and it was unfortunately very subpar.
Yeah, and again, this just feels like something was just dumped onto the newsstands.
Yes.
Just even reviewing it, it's very confusing. I don't recommend it at all. I mean, if you're a purist and you want the covers, go get them. But I wouldn't waste any time reading the story on this. It's just not. Maybe go read the 63-page treatment for the original game. I don't know. Maybe it's going to be a lot more interesting.
It'll definitely be more interesting than this, for sure.
But anyway, hey, why don't we move on and check out the mailbag?
Mister, get your arm out of that mailbox. I mean now.
Oh, dear me. I haven't had so much trouble delivering a package since the incident in Vienna.
When we put this out there, we wanted to get everybody's thoughts on this series. Apparently, most people felt like we did about it. They just didn't want to bother reading it or deal with it. But we did hear from Chris Allen. He produces the Indiana Jones, the IJ, and the UK segments here on the IndyCast. Now, Chris weighed in with his thoughts on the series, and he writes, "Hey, Joe and Keith. Hope this review gets to you in time for your recording. Attached is a voicemail for you. I really enjoyed revisiting this comic again after all these years, so thanks for getting me reading indie literature again. If you guys ever want to send anything into IJ in the UK about the British elements of the Indieverse, feel free. Thanks, and hopefully my review is useful to you guys." Hey, thanks so much for writing in, Chris. Yeah, I've got a question, for British-themed question, Indiana Jones-wise. Why can't we get a good depiction of Marcus Brody?
Now that's a great question. Thanks so much.
There needs to be an investigation into this. Why is that?
I agree. Thanks so much for that email, Chris. We really appreciate it. And Joe, what do you say we play Chris's voicemail to us?
A British tar is a soaring soul.
No time for intros, Dr. Jones. Hi, Joe and Keith. Hope you don't mind the voicemail, but I thought I'd send you a few thoughts from the IJ and UK HQ across the pond about Indiana Jones and the Iron Phoenix. I've I've only got the comic to read in the collected Dark Horse Omnibus, Volume 2, that came out a few years ago. But my overall feeling was that while this had all the elements of an Indiana Jones story, a globetrotting adventure, the appearance of Margus, and some supernatural threads, to name but a few, it just didn't feel enough Indy for me somehow. For a start, the likeness of Indy in the artwork was really off. It was just as if they'd stuck some stubble on a general sketch of a guy who just happens to be wearing a fedora most of the time. As I read any Indy literature, I love to link other bits of canon and non-canon together in my mind, and I wondered if, as well as that Air Force fiasco back in '47, this episode that same year is where Indy began his hatred of those pesky Russians. I also pondered on the possibility that Major Nadia Kurov was the Russian operative who stole or somehow came into possession of Indy's childhood diary and turned it into the Artifacts Evaluation Commission Soviet dossier that we saw resurface back in 2008 in the form of the Lost Journal of Indiana Jones. She does say to Indy on page 147 of the President's book, on page 147 of this second Dark Horse Omnibus, your name has appeared many times in my work, to Indy. There's some other nice touches that I made a mental note of, like Indy making his great escape from the Russians near the beginning of the adventure on a motorbike and jumping over the barbed wire fence a la Steve McQueen. The frozen cavern that Indy discovers in Kiev, for me, was reminiscent of the underworld scene in 2008's graphic novel adventure, The City of the Gods. And both stories, ironically, share an undead/zombie storyline too. I don't think the passage of time was put across very well in this particular adventure either, and there's some very disjointed switches of scene and setting. One UK link I'm not particularly keen on in this is the portrayal of the Irish accent. I get that the storyline I was trying to put across phonetically, the nuances of the Gaelic speech, but it's just quite jarring to read, if not downright insulting. I'm also not sure pagan witches would say "Saints preserve us" either, even if they are Irish witches. I also noted down that there's a hell of a lot of convenient exposition on payphones and in monologue from Indy and Brody. In the Tibetan monastery, is that the grail that he finds? You know, the one from 1938 that slipped down into the depths of the earth along with Elsa Schneider, I wonder? You can also see that Last Crusade's influence in the Ancient One's story of how he lost a wager and had to guard the stone for eternity. I chuckled at the opposite nature of this tale to the Grail Knight's backstory. What I really did like was on page 156 of the omnibus, where for a few panels we see Indy in action in complete silence, on a ledge and using his whip. His wisecracks and quips to himself just get boring elsewhere in this strip. The worst offending line I wrote down was where he says, "Are those my fingers or frozen hot dogs?" This just doesn't sound like the Indy from the movies we know and love. Well, that's about it from me, Joe and Keith. Hope this humble Brit's perspective was okay for you. Thanks again to you both for inspiring me to seek out those old TSR games that I mentioned in the last regular IndyCast episode. I'm really enjoying discovering those retro games and lost adventures of Indy for the first time. I'm off to read more of Major Nadia's Soviet dossier on Indy in the Lost Journal of Indiana Jones. This is Chris A from the UK for IG in the UK signing off. Keep on further adventuring, lads.
Okay, yeah, there's nothing in there I can argue with. I mean, he pretty
nailed
much
it.
Yeah, he did nail it.
Nailed it.
Look, I guess it's just you can listen to us screaming for quite a while, or you can listen to Chris succinctly crystallize our thoughts perfectly there. But
said it way better than we did.
Good references, yeah, good references. Yes. You know, to some of those other Indiana Jones adventures. He did a deep dive into that, so pretty good. Yeah, I enjoyed that review. Glad you could send that in as well, Chris. Look, again, it's just not, like he said, it doesn't feel like a proper Indiana Jones adventure. Even the dialogue doesn't ring true for the character. Yeah, it's just, it's not one of the better ones. So, but,
yeah,
we're glad somebody got to get back into indie comics and indie literature. Yes. So if nothing else, it did that.
Exactly. Yeah, we're glad that you're back into it. There's so many more great stories out there. This unfortunately just wasn't one of them. We also heard from Mark Leibowitz, who hosts the Traveling the Junland Waste podcast. And Mark writes, "Hello, very interesting choice for your next show. I read this 4-issue series through the Dark Horse Omnibus and was delighted to see a cover done by Dave Dorman. It would have been nice if they included the other covers in the omnibus, but I'm glad to be able to read this straight through. The story is good and definitely has that video game feel throughout the story. My understanding is that this was supposed to be a LucasArts game at one time, but was changed into the comic we have today. But I actually like it when a story plays out like a video game, probably why I also enjoy the Star Wars Force Unleashed video game and novels as well. Indy has a mission to collect 3 parts of this jewel, so we get to see him flying off to different places and going through the trials, both physical and mental, throughout the adventure. Just like a good James Bond film, there is the female character who intrigues Indiana as well as being a force against him. But at the end, both seem to get out of their roles and uniforms, enough to have that romantic moment in which you can just begin to hear John Williams' Marianne Love theme begin to play in the background. While the interior art itself is not necessarily my favorite interpretation of Indiana Jones, it did start to grow on me, and I found the sequence done in Tibet very satisfying to look at. You have mentioned before on the podcast how Harrison Ford is a tough face to get right as Indiana Jones in the comics, and I think that this is apparent in some of the panels in this series. Regardless, it's a fun read and a good Indiana Jones action story. I look forward to your review. Well, you definitely have a different take on that, Mark. Thank you so much for the email.
That is a decidedly different take.
Decidedly different take.
Look, maybe we're wrong. I don't know. That's, look, that's what I love about... Look, that's what we love about Indiana Jones. We love about Indiana Jones comic books. We love about the Indiana Jones expanded universe. There's a little something for everybody, right?
Right. I mean, I totally agree with you, Mark. I wish that the omnibus also included all of that. For me, the greatest thing, we talked about it earlier, the greatest thing were those Dave Dorman covers. I wish also that they included all of them. I own the separate issues, but it would have been nice to have those in the omnibus as well. But yeah, for me, that was the greatest part, was to get those covers. But very, very interesting take. Glad you enjoyed it.
Any questions then? No, okay, that's it for the day then.
All right, Keith. Well, Indiana Jones and Nadia were on that train. They're heading back. Such straight, horrible ending to that comic book.
Jeez.
Hopefully he's heading back to the college.
You think they could have beat it over the head a little bit more with the train going into the tunnel, too. Jeez.
Yeah. Moving on past that.
Moving on.
Hopefully Indy's done for the day. He's back in college teaching. But look, we want to hear from everybody out there. We've got some more Dark Horse. Look, better things are on the way. Right, Keith?
Yes.
There's more.
Yes. Well, they have to be, right? They just have to be.
They have to be. Look, as Chris mentioned, we're getting back into reading some of these comics. We're revisiting some of those things. We hope everybody out there listening can go back and look in these comics as well. Let us know what you think, good, bad, or ugly. I mean, there's a mixed bag to talk about on these things. So, Keith, how can they get a hold of us?
Well, first you can check us out on Facebook at The Further Adventures of Indiana Jones, and you could also drop us a line. We'd love to hear from all you guys out there at thefurtheradventures at gmail.com. So please send us your messages. Let us know what you think of these old comics. We'd love to hear your thoughts.
That's how everybody can get a hold of us. Look, we want to get your opinion on these Dark Horse Indiana Jones comics miniseries. Good, bad, or ugly, it doesn't matter. Tell us whatever's on your mind. If you love the covers, if you love the artwork, and look, maybe we're wrong. Maybe we're wrong, horribly wrong on all these things. Maybe zombie Nazis are awesome. Who knows? But look, we want to get your opinion on all these comics, especially the next one that Keith and I are going to tackle. It's going to be Indiana Jones and the Shrine of the Sea Devil, and that is next time on The Further Adventures of Indiana Jones.